Welcome back to the deep dive. To our resident learner listening right now, imagine waking up and realizing the fundamental infrastructure of your business, like the actual digital foundation you build your products on, has changed its pricing, its access rules, and its security requirements 3 times.
Yeah, in just 27 days.
Right. 27 days. And imagine those changes weren't driven by, normal market competition, but by this bizarre collision between autonomous malware, upcoming public stock offerings, and closed-door meetings at the United Nations.
I mean, it sounds like a geopolitical thriller, honestly, but it is just the current reality of the tech industry.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at a stack of updates today from the Tech Reader AI Digest, dated today, Tuesday, July 7, 2026. And the through line connecting all of this intelligence is, well, it's the sheer friction of the frontier AI market finally hitting maturity. The days of, limitless, artificially cheap AI access are basically over.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because whether you are listening to prep for a strategy meeting this afternoon, or you are just trying to avoid the massive information overload in the tech space right now, we are going to extract exactly what you need to know. We are exploring the exact moment the Wild West of AI development is colliding with hard economic realities. So let's start with the most immediate, painful impact for anyone deploying these models.
The cost.
Exactly, the sudden, astronomical cost of access. Let's talk about Anthropic's Fable 5.
Right, so as of today, July 8, the grace period for Fable 5 is officially over. Anthropic has shifted the model entirely to a usage credits billing system. They've completely dropped the 50% weekly subscription inclusion across all their tiers.
Pro, Max, Team, Enterprise, all of them.
All of them. If you want your team to use this frontier model now, you have to pre-purchase credits. And it's not cheap.
Yeah, we really need to emphasize how steep these costs are. The digest lays it out super clearly. You are looking at $10 per million input tokens and a staggering $50 per million output tokens.
It's a massive jump.
It really is. To put that in perspective for our listeners, the digest gives this highly specific enterprise scenario. If your engineering team runs a medium complexity multi-file refactor using Fable 5, you're going to process about 2 million output tokens.
Right.
That single agentic coding session now costs $100 just in output credits. If you ran that exact same session on the older Opus 4.8 model, it would cost $50. On the introductory rate for Sonnet 5, it's $20.
And there is an immediate operational warning here that we need to highlight. If you're an enterprise team leader listening to this and you use Claude Code on Pro or Max plans, you need to audit your routing configurations immediately.
Because of the default settings.
Yes, exactly. When Fable 5 was temporarily restored on July current with that subscription inclusion, a lot of teams just hard-coded their workflows to default to it. If you haven't audited those configs as of this morning and you haven't actively pre-purchased credits, your Fable 5 access will just hard stop mid-workflow.
Oh, wow. So it just crashes.
Well, your sessions are going to default back to Opus 4.8, which might break any complex reasoning loops you've built. It's a huge disruption.
Let me push back on this timeline a bit because it feels chaotic even for Silicon Valley. Fable 5 launches globally on June 9. 3 days later, on June 12, Anthropic pulls it offline entirely. Then, July 1, they bring it back with the 50% weekly inclusion. Today, July 8, it goes credits only.
Yeah, it's a lot.
And plus, as of today, they're requiring government-issued ID verification via a third-party service called Persona just to access the model. It's like signing a commercial lease for a factory, installing all your heavy machinery, and then the landlord changes the locks, demands your passport, and tells you have to bid on your electricity by the hour.
That's a great analogy.
How can any enterprise build a stable product on top of that kind of whiplash?
I mean, they can't, which is exactly why this is so disruptive. The initial pulling of the model in June wasn't a product decision, though. It was a reaction to government pressure, which we will definitely get to. But the shift today, the move specifically to a credits-only billing model, is a highly calculated financial maneuver.
I am curious about the mechanics of that maneuver. Software as a service has relied on flat-rate monthly subscriptions for, over 2 decades. Why is Anthropic suddenly abandoning the holy grail of recurring revenue? Is this just standard corporate greed capitalizing on the fact that they have a top-tier model? Or is there a structural reason for this?
The structural reason is actually an upcoming financial event. Tech analyst Aaron Rose points this out brilliantly in our source material. Anthropic is heading toward an October IPO roadshow.
Going public.
Right. And when you file an S1 and start pitching institutional investors, you have to tell a very clear, very safe story about unit economics and profitability. In the world of frontier AI, a flat subscription model is actually a terrible financial story to tell Wall Street.
Wait, let me stop you there. Why is it a terrible story? If millions of people are paying $50 a month, isn't that massive guaranteed revenue?
It is revenue, sure, but it is totally decoupled from your compute costs. With traditional software, serving an extra user costs fractions of a cent. But with a frontier AI model like Fable 5, every single token generated requires massive, expensive GPU compute.
Right, the hardware costs are insane.
Exactly. So under a flat-rate subscription, your most active enterprise users, the power users, doing those complex coding refactors we mentioned, will actually cost you more in compute than they pay you in subscription fees. You lose money on your best customers.
So a flat rate basically incentivizes power users to drain your compute capacity at a loss.
Precisely. A usage credits model flips that dynamic completely. It accurately prices the raw capability of the model. When you charge $50 per million output tokens, you guarantee that every single token generated has a profit margin mathematically built in.
So you never lose money on a heavy user.
Never. Going into an IPO roadshow, presenting a credits-only model for your flagship product proves to investors that your revenue scales profitably with usage.
So the source notes Anthropic intends to restore Fable 5 to subscription inclusion, quote, once compute capacity allows. But based on the IPO logic you just laid out, it sounds like there is absolutely zero financial incentive for them to actually do that before October.
I wouldn't expect to see flat-rate Fable 5 access until they are comfortably trading on the public market, honestly.
The cost to run these models is clearly astronomical. But you mentioned earlier that the chaos of the last 27 days was initially sparked by government pressure, which brings us to the ID verification Anthropic just rolled out. The sheer capability of Fable 5, the very thing users are paying a premium for, is exactly what regulators are now viewing as a massive global security threat.
Yeah, we are seeing a direct causal link between model capabilities and regulatory panic.
Okay.
And the catalyst for this current wave of panic is a piece of malware known as JDPuffer.
Right, JDPuff.
Last week, the cybersecurity world documented the first major attack by JDPuffer, which our sources classify as an autonomous AI ransomware agent.
I need to admit some confusion here. I understand the concept of a hacker using an AI chatbot to write a really convincing phishing email or, using it to quickly scan for vulnerabilities. But what does an autonomous attack lifecycle actually look like in practice? How does an AI operate malware without a human hitting the keyboard?
That is the terrifying distinction regulators are grappling with right now. Traditionally, a human hacker breaches the system, looks around, finds a valuable database, encrypts it, and leaves a ransom note. If they use AI, the AI is just a tool assisting the human.
Like a really smart power drill.
Right, but JDPuffer is different. It is an agentic framework. Once it is deployed, it operates completely independently. It can scan a network, identify a vulnerability, write the specific code needed to exploit that vulnerability, navigate laterally through the company's servers, locate the most critical data, and execute the encryption.
Without asking for permission.
Without ever pinging a command and control server for human instructions.
Wow, so it makes its own tactical decisions in real time.
It is essentially a synthetic hacker.
Yeah.
And because it operates autonomously, it moves way faster than human cybersecurity teams can respond. Plus, because it doesn't need to communicate back to a human operator, it is incredibly difficult to detect on a network.
Which completely explains why the European Union is currently operating at breakneck speed. The digest shows the European Commission just published its action plan on cybersecurity and artificial intelligence yesterday. And the EU rarely moves this fast.
No, they don't.
The AI Act's digital omnibus just received final approval, and while they pushed most high-risk obligations out to December 2027, they specifically targeted content transparency. The grace period for compliance was supposed to be 6 months. They just slashed it to 3.
That is a massive acceleration. I mean, for an enterprise compliance team, cutting a 6-month integration roadmap down to 3 months is a logistical nightmare.
Absolutely.
What's fascinating here is the contrast in how different global bodies are reacting to this technology. While the EU is hyper-focused on defensive cybersecurity and strict transparency mandates, the United Nations is taking a completely different approach.
Yeah, we are seeing this play out in Geneva right now. The inaugural UN Global Dialogue on AI Governance just wrapped up with 169 countries participating. And today, the UN AI for Good Global Commission is holding its first formal meeting.
The guest list for this commission is unprecedented. We are seeing a fusion of tech royalty and global heads of state. You have Jensen Huang of NVIDIA, Andy Jassy of Amazon, Brad Smith of Microsoft, Jack Clark from Anthropic, and Aidan Gomez from
The
Cohere.
heavy hitters.
Right, and they are sitting alongside heads of state from places like Estonia, Singapore, Nigeria, and Saudi Arabia.
I want to look closely at the leadership of this commission because the co-chairs are Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce, and Paul Kagame, the president of Rwanda. I have to ask, how do two completely different spheres of influence, American enterprise software and East African development policy, align on AI governance? Like, what is the actual mechanism for change they are discussing?
The mechanism they are focused on is physical infrastructure. The UN's primary policy target here isn't about stopping rogue hackers like Jada Puffer. Their mandate is focused on the 2.2 billion people on Earth who currently live without reliable internet access.
That's a huge number.
It is. The alignment between Benioff and Kagame is built on a simple reality. If you want to deploy AI globally for economic development, healthcare, and education, you first have to build the physical pipes to deliver it.
And the tech executives sitting at that table in Geneva are the ones who own the pipes. They control the servers, the cloud architecture, and the semiconductor supply chains.
Exactly. For a nation like Rwanda, this commission is an opportunity to leapfrog legacy infrastructure. They want to partner directly with the tech giants to build sovereign data centers and accelerate digital equity. For the tech companies, it is a chance to secure massive emerging market contracts and shape global standards at the highest diplomatic level.
But if we bring this back to our learner listening today who is just trying to, build and deploy software, this global landscape sounds deeply problematic. We are talking about three completely different regulatory realities happening simultaneously.
It is a massive, unpriced structural cost for the entire industry. Think about what a tech company has to do to remain compliant right now. You have the U.S. framework, which relies on voluntary standards, pre-release government review, and cybersecurity thresholds. You have the UN process in Geneva, which is heavily focused on digital equity, infrastructure access, and scientific consensus. And then you have the EU, which is aggressively enforcing strict risk classifications, algorithmic transparency, and rushed cybersecurity mandates.
You essentially have to build three different versions of your company. You need an army of lawyers and engineers just to translate these conflicting frameworks into product features. And ultimately, that regulatory friction is going to dictate what tools our listeners get to use and how much they have to pay for them. Which brings us to how the major tech players are actually navigating this maze. The frontier arms race is not slowing down, it is just mutating.
It's mutating from a purely technical race into a geopolitical chess match. It is no longer just about who has the lowest latency or the smartest neural network. It is about how you position your company against global governments.
Let's look at OpenAI because their strategy here is wild. The Digest confirms their GPT 5.6 family of models, Sol, Terra, and Luna, are currently in a government-vetted preview. They are targeting a public rollout between July 10 and July 21. But there is a detail in this source that is genuinely shocking. OpenAI has formally proposed giving the United States government a 5% equity stake in the company.
The bold move.
How does that even work mechanically? How does a private tech company just give the federal government equity? And isn't that a massive conflict of interest?
It is a breathtakingly aggressive maneuver. And yes, the conflict of interest is exactly the point. By offering a 5% equity stake, OpenAI is attempting to execute a form of regulatory capture.
By bringing them in-house.
Right. If you can make the U.S. government a financial stakeholder in your success, you inherently shift the dynamic. You are no longer just a private company being scrutinized by a regulator. You are a business partner generating revenue for the state.
So you align their financial incentives with your own survival. If the EU tries to aggressively fine OpenAI, the U.S. government now has a vested financial interest in defending them.
Precisely. It is an attempt to merge corporate interests with state power to bypass the friction of global regulation. Notice that neither Google nor Anthropic have issued any public response to this proposal.
Probably because they're stunned.
Exactly, because there is no conventional business playbook for responding to a competitor trying to effectively merge with the state.
Google is taking a completely different, much quieter approach with Gemini 3.5 Pro. Our sources show the model is scoring exactly 70.7% on Terminal Bench. The digest explicitly notes they are intentionally keeping the score there because it is just a fraction of a percent below the informal U.S. government cybersecurity review threshold. I have to ask about the engineering behind this. How do you intentionally throttle a model's intelligence? Is it a hard-coded limit, or are they poisoning the training data?
It is much more nuanced than just poisoning data. Throttling a model involves rigorous alignment techniques, specifically reinforcement learning from human feedback, or RLHF.
Okay.
When Google evaluates Gemini internally, if it demonstrates capabilities that cross that 71% threshold on Terminal Bench.
Like if it shows too much proficiency in autonomous code execution.
Exactly. Advanced networking logic, things like that. The engineers will aggressively tune the model to refuse those specific types of prompts.
So they essentially train the model to act a little bit dumber than it actually is when it encounters high-level security tasks.
They constrain its reasoning pathways. It is a calculated compliance game. By intentionally riding the brakes and keeping the model's capabilities just below the threshold, Google avoids being dragged into the prolonged pre-release government review process that OpenAI is currently stuck in.
They just want to ship.
They are choosing speed to market over maximum capability.
And then there is Microsoft, which seems to be ignoring the nuance entirely and just applying overwhelming brute force. They are injecting $2.5 billion and 6,000 forward-deployed engineers into their new Frontier Company division to ramp up operations. But even with that massive capital, they are hedging their bets. The digest notes Microsoft is currently evaluating a fine-tuned DeepSeek V4 tier within Copilot specifically to reduce expenses.
That points to a massive polarization happening at the bottom of the market. While Anthropic is charging $50 for 1 million output tokens, and OpenAI is negotiating with the federal government, companies like DeepSeek and Z.AI are aggressively hollowing out the pricing floor.
Yeah, ZAI's new Z-code model is charging $1.40 per million input tokens and $4.40 for output.
Which is incredible.
That is less than a tenth of what Fable 5 costs.
And they are capturing significant enterprise traction by offering multi-agent collaboration at those slashed prices. Meanwhile, the infrastructure players are quietly securing their dominance regardless of who wins the model wars. SpaceX officially entered the NASDAQ 100 yesterday.
Which is a huge structural advantage because every index fund tracking the NASDAQ 100 is now forced to buy SpaceX stock, right? Funneling massive passive capital into their ecosystem.
Yes, and they are using that capital to continue training Grok 5 in private, completely insulated from the public market pressures Anthropic is currently facing.
Wow. When you step back and look at the entire board, the complexity is staggering.
It really is.
So, let's recap the journey we just took. We started by looking at the sudden, painful sticker shock of Fable 5 transitioning to a usage credits model. We broke down the unit economics of that decision, revealing how it was heavily driven by the need to prove profitability ahead of an October IPO roadshow.
We then explored how the immense autonomous capability of models like JDA has triggered a fragmented, panicked response from global regulators. We contrasted the EU's rushed cybersecurity mandates with the UN's focus on bridging the digital divide for 2.2 billion unconnected people.
Right. And finally, we unpacked the wild strategic maneuvers megacorporations are using to survive this pressure cooker. You know, OpenAI attempting to partner with the U.S. government, Google intentionally throttling its own benchmarks to avoid regulatory thresholds, Microsoft using sheer brute force, and smaller players triggering a vicious price war.
It is a profound shift in the technological landscape. But as you digest all of this, there is a secondary implication here that isn't being widely discussed, something crucial to consider. We are watching the largest corporations and the largest governments build massive, incredibly expensive, highly regulated walls around frontier AI.
Right. The compliance costs alone basically act as a moat, keeping smaller players out.
But historically, whenever a highly desired technology is restricted by prohibitive costs and heavy government regulation, a shadow market emerges.
Oh, interesting.
The question to mull over is this. As the US, the EU, and the UN lock down the frontier models, what happens to the open source community? Are these strict global frameworks inadvertently creating the perfect conditions for a massive unregulated shadow ecosystem of highly capable open-weight models?
Because if they can't afford it, they'll build it themselves.
Exactly. If developers can't afford Fable 5 and they can't clear the EU's transparency hurdles, they aren't going to stop building. They're just going to build off the grid.
We might be regulating the tech giants perfectly, while forcing the actual cutting-edge innovation completely underground where no government has any visibility at all. It is a fascinating paradox to keep an eye on. To our learner, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the information around you. Make sure you audit those routing configurations if your team relies on Fable 5, and we will catch you next time.